Simone. Today we are going to be talking about not just a piece that was published in the New York Times called "The Trouble with Wanting Men" by Jean Garnett, but some other pieces she wrote leading up to this.
Okay.
Because I think
you're getting into her lore.
Oh yeah, I've had to break apart these pieces, restructure how they're being delivered, because in the same way our Life of a Cenobite episode really dug into the life of Anna Valens and through it understood one way that the urban monoculture can destroy everything in your life that matters. This individual, you know, a lot of the Manosphere has been examining her takes and just being like like women being salty about men, you know, making bad decisions and ultimately being a hypocrite, which, you know, okay, all of that is true. But I think it's more interesting to dive into the psychology and sort of how she spiraled into this position in her life and how feminism can destroy the mind of a woman and lead her to absolute emotional ruin in the same way that, you know, we talk about sort of the transmemetic virus can destroy the life of like a young autistic person.
Sure. Yeah.
And I don't think that feminism, like when you see this person's life, you're going to be like, wow, like there's a lot we can learn from this.
Oh, a cautionary tale. Well, perhaps then we shall share this with our children when they get older, at least especially our daughters. I'm curious to see what you find, though.
Yes.
It's not, is there stuff that wasn't obvious to us? Oh, well, just tell me. Let's go.
Well, yeah, what's more interesting when you read sort of, and this is why it's good to peel back into the older stuff as well, is when you read her in-state, she just appears to be such a vile and hateful person who deserves every bit of sadness that she's experiencing due to living a life that's dedicated to prejudice, but and prejudice against men. But it's how did she get there, right? Like,
did she start off a little more like optimistic and hopeful?
Yes. She started off with a whole everything is working, and it wasn't even her that I would argue started this trail of dominoes, but her husband.
She was married?
Oh yes, we'll get into this. Okay, so let's jump into this.
Happily married. I thought this was about a single young woman who's trying to make it work.
No. If the experts say my romantic letdowns have some larger social significance, I am not going to argue. The men I want are not wanting me badly enough, not communicating with me clearly enough, not devoting themselves to me. By the way, like you read that as like a normal human and you're like, that comes across as psychotic.
Yeah, a little entitled.
Men are horrible because the men who I want aren't devoting themselves to me enough.
I think she
By the way, if you want to see a picture of her, I'll put one on screen here because I find that sometimes helps people. She is, I'd say, on the more attractive side for her age, normal-looking white woman.
Okay.
All this certainly seems calamitous enough to warrant an ism. Wait, that they're not devoting themselves to you enough, the men who you want, is calamitous in your mind. The level of entitlement, right? Like, you are a walking nightmare for a guy. But to continue, men are what is rotten in the state of straightness. And why shouldn't we have an all-inclusive byword for our various pessimisms about them? Domestic pessimism, they still do less of the housework and childcare. Partner violence pessimism, femicide is still gruesomely routine. Erotic pessimism, the clitoris and its properties still elude many of them. And the perpetually proud masculinist subcultures that have risen, at least in part as a reaction to these pessimisms, keep coughing up new reasons to fear and rage and complain about men. And I just love that all of this here gets framed in the men who I want not just don't want her, but aren't devoting themselves to her.
Yeah, I also have a beef with people who, I don't know, are extremely entitled about being pleasured properly when, like, for men, it's so freaking easy. Like, there's literally like a handle and you kind of like, I'm not saying there's not finesse to it, but like, it's so easy. Whereas for women, it's like, well, some women feel it this way and some women feel it this way. And like, I couldn't, like, if someone was like, pleasure this woman, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Whereas if someone was like, pleasure this man, I'd be like, okay, I'm pretty sure, like, male or female, you can probably figure that out. But if you are given like a random woman, any of us, and someone's holding a gun to our heads and like, you need to make her orgasm, like, we're all going to be like, okay, I guess I'm going to die. And here she is being like, how dare people? I mean, we've already addressed all the stuff around like, you know, violence in lesbian relationships being actually pretty high.
Right. So just to her point there about domestic violence of women, if you look at straight violence levels in heterosexual couples, the violence levels in lesbian couples are way higher, whereas violence levels in gay male couples are the same as straight couples or less, depending on the study you're looking at, which implies that it is not the men who are engendering the violence. Like we can just look at the data. It's the same as divorce rates. Divorce rates way higher in lesbian communities than in straight communities or gay communities.
Yeah.
We can just look at the rates. Like it's coming from inside the house, women. But hold on, I had pulled that from the center of the article so we can get to like her core complaint and what she's trying to set up here. This hatred that some women have now of straight dating and the suffering and anxiety that they feel when on the straight dating marketplace. All right.
Have they tried lesbian dating? Like, is that
We'll
much
get
better?
to that. We'll get to that.
Okay, I'm very curious.
That does come up in here, but we're gonna go back in time and go to what happened to her last marriage, because clearly she was married, right?
Yeah, what happened?
One of the reasons my marriage ended was that I fell in love with another man who I'll refer to by his first initial J.
And people aren't devoted enough to her.
Well, hold on. Spontaneously graceful with a soft voice and an inordinate sad smile. Jay made me laugh, stopping my breath, being a quote unquote good guy. He intimated from the jump that he did not know how to quote unquote do relationships, giving me to understand that if I expected one with him, or as he may have conceptualized it from him, I did so at my peril, which was his peril too, since he'd hate to hurt me. Still, he pursued me. We seemed to, quote unquote, be doing something together. So note here, this guy who she pursued, okay, told her, I am not interested in a serious relationship with you.
Yeah.
And worse, he's doing the classic good guy routine who's not actually a good guy. I just hate to see you be hurt. But if you chase me, that's what's going to happen. So you should stay with your husband, sweetheart. No, seriously, stay with your husband, sweetheart.
Yeah, like I'm not here for you.
Yeah. My husband and I have an open relationship at the time Jay and I met. So the terms of our involvement were at first limited. And although Jay exerted a pleasant pressure against these limitations, ultimately they suited him. I was the one who violated the terms by finding it intolerable after a while to care that much in a way for one person while being married to another. I could not disambiguate sex from love, nor love from devotion. Futility, family integration, things I wanted with, from Jay. Even as throughout the year and a half or so that we saw each other, he continued to gesture to his incapacity to commit as if it were a separate being, an unfortunate child who followed and relied upon him, maybe, or a physical constraint. I stood there reacting to him for a while he, sad faced, back at me, looked like a box mime. He couldn't talk about it. He wished things were different. Maybe someday the child would mature, the glass would break. But for now, there was really nothing to be done. And later in this, she'll talk about how men and women men do not take time to understand what women are really telling them between the lines, and it's men who can't communicate well, and this is why dating is so bad for women. And I'm like, I am reading you're writing down in a favorable way to you what this guy told you, and it seems to me that he was communicating with a fire hose and a siren in your face saying, I will not commit to you, I am using you for sex, please stop taking this further, I really don't like you in that way, but don't want to hurt your feelings. And she just refused to listen to what he was loudly and repeatedly communicating to her because it didn't follow what she wanted to be true. And this is the thing. She's showing that her problems are downstream of her own communication failures in not listening to what's being loudly signaled to her. It seems to me, surveying the field of dating as a novice, that this kind of studious irreproachability, male helplessness abounds. I keep encountering and hearing it about men who, quote unquote, can't. Have these ever men heard of, quote unquote, don't want to? No, What he was telling you is, I don't want a serious relationship with you, but he didn't want to hurt your feelings. So what he said was, oh, I'm just not mature enough for that yet. I'm not in a place in my life where I want that right yet. But what he was telling you in no uncertain terms was, I don't want you. You're just not that good. I want other things. I want to keep playing the field. You are not worth my time or emotional effort. And this woman was unwilling to hear that. And then to go later in the piece, she talks about why he refused to start something serious with her after she left her husband. I toppled the whole structure of my life for a man who, when I asked him, do you want to be with me or not, replied after a few seconds of silence, I want to be with you, and I want to be everything, everywhere, all at once. Jay was referring, of course, to the 2022 surreal sci-fi comedy set across a multitude of parallel universes, in which many versions of the protagonists play out many versions of their lives. I love how he's playing the manic pixie dream boy, like playing this woman like a fiddle, while also clearly signaling to her, I only want you for sex.
Yeah. Like, I wish I could fob you off to another version of me in another dimension, because that would be great right now.
Yeah, because the me in this dimension
does not
want you. To be clear. I have other plates I'm juggling right now. You go off and do your own thing, right? But I think that when man in the Manosphere, talk about a woman where they're like, oh, she destroyed herself on Chad, like alpha widows is what they call them. These women who got these great guys and then couldn't accept. This is what this form of alpha talks like, okay? They don't talk like, I'm going to put you down. I'm going to, throw you around. They talk like this to women, and women eat out of their hand and destroy their lives chasing these types of men, okay? Now, we're going to go to a different piece that she wrote. Scenes from an Open Marriage. This was written 3 years before the piece that you just read above.
Oh, the before. Okay.
About 6 months after our daughter was born, my husband...
They have a daughter together?
Right? To destroy this girl's life over her wanting to be with this other guy who told her he wasn't interested.
Well, good. She's a married woman with a kid. No kidding.
Yeah.
There's baggage. Oh, okay.
So we're going to go over what she wants in a guy, the way she talks about guys, because it's terrible. She's clearly a very vile person.
Okay.
But how did she get lured into this life of polyamory that seems like it destroyed her marriage and then spit her out in a world where, she, a late 30s, early 40s woman, is just not desirable. And she thought that she would be desirable she's desirable to men who want to pass her around, but she's not desirable to be the one for any guy who she would actually want, other than her original husband. So how did she end up in this open relationship to begin with?
Indeed.
About 6 months after our daughter was born, my husband calmly set the idea on the table like a decorative gun. I said I'd think about it. I couldn't pretend to be that surprised by the proposition or ignorant of my part in engendering it. I was too tired. I was too busy. The baby. I had a deadline. I was reading. I was watching The Sopranos. Again, I was depressed. I just wanted a nap, needed a nap, ached for a hot, throbbing nap. This might, I figured, be quote unquote real marriage, harder, deeper marriage opening its cute mouth all the way and showing the mess that was back there. Maybe, I thought, the libido of a certain kind of woman is an animal that lives a little and then crawls into a cave and lies there panting for a few decades until, with a final rabid pant, it expires. Could it expire so early? Or perhaps I was taking a breather, postpartum, understandable surely, given how a 6.5-pound human body had been slither pulled out of the place I get
small baby. Oh.
Or one of the places. Or one of the places. Okay, so by the way, what you will learn as we go through the later piece, after she left this guy 3 years later, she is sexually insatiable. Just everything she talks about is who's effing her, how they're effing her, blah, 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 blah. I cut all that out of this, by the way. You guys are going to have to hear that for your benefit. But it is clear that her libido had not died. It had died contextually with her husband. And I think that what we actually see is it might not even be a death of a libido. It might be that like when a lot of women have what's called a reactive sexuality, which means that they become aroused when they are put in a sexual scenario.
Yeah.
And often husbands, especially a progressive husband, like this guy was a feminist wife, don't feel comfortable putting their wives in a sexual scenario when they haven't asked to be put in a sexual scenario.
Right.
And I think that this is how libidos die in a lot of marriages.
Yeah, this is a super underrated point.
But I'd also note here is this expectation that you need to be having lots of sex with a 6 months old. When I have a 6 months old in the house, I basically have no sex. Like I wouldn't want to risk. No, you've generally had a C-section. It could cause scarring that could prevent future embryos.
I mean, I think after the 6 month mark, it's
okay. Yeah, but I'm talking about that 6 months window.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, whatever.
I don't like to risk it. I don't like to risk your body, which carries my kids, right? Like, and I think that a lot of guys hear this and they're like, oh, that's horrible. Oh, whatever. Sex, recreational sex exists entirely. Like the entire reason you want this is to produce offspring.
Yeah. Should it be any surprise that a woman who's lactating and sleep deprived and, dealing with an infant.
Even more so, if it has the opposite effect. If it could create scar tissue, which could prevent future embryos from implanting.
That too. Yeah. I think you're more likely to have complications in your pregnancy if you get pregnant super, super soon after having a kid too.
You're cucking yourself. You're cucking yourself because you are allowing your own arousal pattern to limit the number of offspring you have and to hurt your relationship with the woman who is having those future offspring on your behalf. You shouldn't be trying to get pregnant again 6 months after the last kid. And people are like, oh, well, you should have sex for X reason or Y reason. And in reality, no, I don't think you should. And a lot of people will be like, oh, Malcolm, this is just you being, low testosterone or something. And I point out, because I've often pointed out with my facial structure, but I was recently looking at Nebula. If you know how testosterone affects a person's body, you would know by my facial structure, I actually developed in a very high testosterone environment. And I'm 98% in terms of testosterone production. Like I'm like 2 standard deviations above the norm. I'm in the top 2% of men in testosterone production. But my testosterone production has almost certainly gone down because it goes down when you're in a monogamous, stable relationship, and it goes down when you have children with the number of children you have for obvious biological reasons. And I think that some men just see sex as like something that they need, like food or something like that, when it's just not. If it's getting in the way of a stable...
have, what's the word, perfunctory sex for the same reason that people have perfunctory travel, where they're like, I'm pretty sure that it's a sign that I'm not thriving if I'm not going on expensive trips every year, that kind of thing. So they're like, well, I have to do it because otherwise there must be something wrong with my marriage or something wrong with me, or I'm not manly enough or something like that.
Yeah, but I think that, it's good to translate these desires into their purpose, whether you believe God gave you them or whether you believe evolution gave you them. When you see a busty woman and that arouses you, or you see, a character in an anime, let's say, dating 5 women, and you're like, oh, I really like watching this. That is your biological response that exists because you are supposed to want to have kids and give those kids a good childhood. And so reframing that, I think what led to a lot of this is her husband wanting more sex. That is functionally what destroyed everything that came downstream. And it's clear, given how reactive her sexuality is and how lusty after men she is, that she probably would have been okay with it had he just worked with her to try to find out what works for her after the kid had grown up enough that they didn't, that they weren't 6 months old, right? What is there to want, after all? He is mine sacredly in sickness and in other states of being, except he is not. And his absolute non-proprietary realness can flash out so suddenly that the spell of matrimonial monotony is reversed and becomes again a free man. And so I note here that even the way she frames her marriage and her vows here were like not that serious. The first time he came, and I'm just jumping around in this piece because I don't want to get that deep into it, but it's interesting to see how a lot of this diving into the world of polyamory before it destroyed their marriage was being framed in her head and in the husband's head. So you can know if this is happening to you, and it can all seem like it's going okay at first. The first time he came home, boyish, whisper laughing in the dark, as he tore off his sweatshirt and climbed into bed, he used the word fun. I had been waiting, braced for some seismic shift, but there he was, home and mine again, was out so much as a waking the baby. Just P and V, I reminded myself, with people attached through. My husband and somebody else moving deliberately, perhaps tenderly, in pursuit of each other and pleasure beyond. But didn't he deserve some compartment of his own, a chamber of mystery? Don't we all? I found I could be happy for my husband in his fun, more than happy. In fact, I could be a real thrill to let your partner go out and give it fully to another woman and then come home and look at you in the eyes and kiss deeply and touch over that. It is romantic in a way that culturally under scripted moments often are.
And this is for some people. I'm sure I know for some people this is a thing.
Which is funny. And people know that, like, with our relationship, I'm allowed to sleep with other people if I want to. I just don't think it's worth the effort. But I certainly, wouldn't make it a regular thing. And her husband, clearly made this like an everyday thing that was causing, very clear here, stress on her part. And it's also clear that she went into all of this knowing the risk. The inherent risk of an open marriage is exhilarating, but seeing the risk is a positive thing. She had a daughter, right? Like, why is the risk exhilarating? Nothing refines a romance like proximate disaster, but it's not a romance. You have a daughter, your parents. You're not romancing each other. In fact, ours began when at 17, we went home together from the funeral of a mutual friend who had been on American Airlines Flight 11. The city was covered in ash from that fall, and us city kids, where there was a strong buddy system vibe, like everyone quickly grab your buddy. This is not a drill. I still think of that friend whenever I'm traveling alone and a plane leaves the ground. I think of my husband at those times too. Imagine him mourning me, reviewing our parting final words via text exchange. Cool, coming. Can you look on the floor in the front seat? As the third round, and now she's talking about a different thing here after the funeral friends are talking. And I think that this leans to the point I was making earlier about thinking that sex is an absolute part of marriage, like constant sex. As the third round of drinks arrived, the woman across from me said with a laugh that she hardly ever had sex anymore. Oh yeah, came a voice from farther down the bench. We haven't had sex since H was born. A third agreed that sex was barely a thing lately. Reflectively, I joined the rush to wrap the initial confession and assurances. Even the married women with kids seemed, in her looks and noises, to allow some lessening was inevitable after a while, or else, outnumbered by the new and newish mothers, she just knew her audience. Only the single woman, who listened wide-eyed and wavering in the schadenfreude exurbs of concealed alarm, was left to insist on the value of frequent, high-quality effing. And it's like, the only reason you want that effing is because you're hoping one of these guys settles down with you and starts having kids.
This is so bizarre because all of my friends in high school and everything, we loved romance mangas and whatnot, but like they were probably all asexual. Like there was no lust for boys ever discussed. And I can't imagine I've never been in any conversation with women in which an interest in sex has been expressed, which is so strange. I can't imagine this meal.
No, but I think that this happens. It's actually interesting that you say this, because I think that what you're saying is true. You do not often see this in young female friend groups. This is something that begins to happen in the Sex and the City groups, which I'll talk about as I go further, where they're dating a chain of men who are using them for sex. And so now the key relationship they have with men is as, well, basically sex toys. Now, of course, they don't realize that that's what they've been reduced to. And that's what this woman has been reduced to after leaving her husband and abandoning her duties as a mother. But it's because they are that is a predominant way that they are relating socially, because they're trying desperately to recapture a real deep relationship, like the one that this J guy was dangling in front of her so that he could use her for sex.
Wow.
I think that that's what's happening. And I think that your experiences are actually correct here. And that the group of girls who get around a table and talk about sex, that this is a phenomenon that married women don't often do. Have you ever?
Married? No. Single? No. Young teen? Never. I mean, I don't know. Like I hung out with nerds. I mean, like, it was anime and
Yeah.
manga and Doctor Who and all that. But like nerds, there are voracious nerds too. I just don't know. This is just so strange to me. I wonder if there's some kind of selective thing where like women tend to sort and just
I don't think that's true. I remember the girl I dated in college, well, we had sex occasionally. She was actually one of the people I had sex with the least of all the partners, but she had a friend who was just completely asexual and anti-sex.
and it was
And
like notable to her.
but yeah, I mean, it was a big part of this other girl's personality. Like, sex is gross.
Oh, like publicly?
Yeah, like publicly, it was like part of her thing.
That's so
That
weird.
I mean, I
I don't know. I
suppose.
think anyone making any bit of their sexual part, like their sexual tendencies, part of their identity, to me is just bizarre.
Yeah, I do see that as a little weird, but it's a common thing within the urban monoculture and everything like that, and people wanting to, discuss it and make it a key part of their identity.
Yeah.
But the point I was making here is these other girls who were married and not having much sex anymore, you change. Your biology is meant to change when you're in a marriage, okay?
Yeah.
And if your biology is functioning correctly, and keep in mind, biology doesn't always function correctly. Sometimes men find other men attractive. But you, as a guy with 5 kids, if you have the same sexual appetite you did when you had 0 kids, you are about as broken as a guy who prefers other men.
Oh, good
It's
heavens.
just not the way your biology is supposed to work for obvious evolutionary reasons. And so
Careful, you might start sounding like Ben Shapiro here. Everyone's going to be like, really, Malcolm?
Wow, that was one of the times we went viral when I pointed out to men this is the testosterone thing, and they're like, "Oh, don't you want to look high T?" And I was like, "High T is a sign that you're a genetic failure.
Yeah.
If you're still high T in middle ages, because your T and sex drive is supposed to drop if you're in a long-term monogamous relationship with lots of kids. And so if you still have it at those ages, it probably means you're not in a monogamous.
It's your hormonal profile in the death throes of someone who knows that they're about to go terminal.
Yeah. Your body's basically going for broke because that's not healthy for you to stay at for a long time, right? It causes riskier behavior and stuff like that. And I also point out, like, you wouldn't want to take advice from one of these people either, because they're in a mindset, like, basically what happens to a male brain when they go into father mode versus gym bro mode is they're going from go for broke, I need to be the top so I can breed the most, to it's my job to protect my family, build alliances, and ensure stability within my community, which means that they're typically going to give much better advice and be a much better ally rather than the more crab in a bucket mentality that is baked into the male brain at those sort of earlier stages or when you are failing in romantic pursuits. But then to continue with this article, I did and do worry, especially about the younger girls in their 20s. Were they all right, these kids? How did they feel about being quote unquote on the side? Occasionally, I stumbled into something like outrage on their behalf, as I thought I were the spirited friend in the drama. F that guy. Were they being exploited? In fact, wasn't I exploiting them, outsourcing the labor of care, pleasure, and attention, affirmation to this scattered, precarious workforce? How sinister in that light, in those nights my husband and I spent scrolling through the faces of sexual supply, our ethic blatantly consumerist, collecting primary and vivacious thrills that rebounded to our own marriage, strengthening our family through the efforts and maybe even the pain of others. And I love that you can see sort of how exploitative this is in the way that she was doing it.
So they're in their 30s and they're both like
helping her husband hook up with 20-year-olds.
Skeezing on, oh my goodness. Okay.
All right. And she knows it's wrong, but she's like, whatever. But here is how the article ended before we get back to the other article in her, how she's sort of thinking about all this. M is, by the way, before I go into this, the husband's girlfriend. Here's another scene. My husband and daughter and me in the car, parked at the station, waiting for M. We hear the rush of the train, the opening of the doors, the distant announcer's voice. Various strangers emerge in masks, greet the riders, depart. Suddenly, I hear my daughter singing M's name. My husband, window humming down as he calls out to her and catching the sight of the familiar baseball hat pulled low over the messy curls. I feel the approach of the world itself coming to puncture the seal. Let in some light and air. And so this all felt good to her. She really talked throughout this article how much she appreciates this M woman helping her around the house with chores and with childcare. But you can see that the daughter is beginning to see M as the mother and not her as the mother, even before the divorce. So at first I felt bad for this husband, but then when I read this other piece, I was like, oh, he's probably with M now. M just seems less crazy than this woman and to have already taken on the role of mother before any of this happened. But anyway,
I don't want this life.
Yeah, I know. But so she's created this narrative. So to get back to where we are, around, you know, the men, what was the word she used here? Like hetero-pessimism or something, right? Like some women just...
That was hetero-fatalism.
Hetero-fatalism. They hate their fate as hetero women because they have to date these horrible, evil things that are men. And so I want to dive into, okay, but what are you doing? Like, if men are these toxic things that are doing all these horrible things to you, what are your actions like? And what are the man's actions like, even by your own admission? And who is actually sort of the vile one here? Why is it that the lesbian relationships have the higher rates of spousal abuse? Why is it that they have higher rates of divorce? Why is it that when you get two women together versus a man and a woman, things seem to always be worse? Well, let's get into her own account of her life.
Okay.
I was looking forward to seeing you again. He texted me the following week around lunchtime, but I'm going through some intense anxiety today and need to lay low, frowny face. Quote unquote, totally understand, I replied. But I didn't. Feeble, fallible, looking forward is not longing. A man should want me urgently or not at all. I was about to collapse into a ritual of frustrated horniness, fantasy, masturbation, snacks, when a friend urged me to join her and two other women for dinner. So keep in mind, this was a woman who just before said that her entire arousal system had stopped working, and a guy doesn't get back to her fast enough and is trying to be vulnerable with her, something that she would say that she wanted from men throughout the piece. I'm not going to read through those parts. And her response is... gross, but also I need to just go and masturbate and eat, like stuff my face. Like, what? But anyway, so a friend invites her for dinner with other women in this position. And note, you can be like, why is she thinking about sex? Why is she talking about sex? Because when you're used like this as a woman, the way that men keep you on the table is they promise something more. You know, they dangle something more in front of you, like this guy is doing. You know, he's like, oh, sorry, can't see you today, anxiety issues, let's talk again in a few weeks. And so the women who are going through this are constantly thinking about these men and the way that they are relating to and being related to by these men. So one of the other women goes, of course he had anxiety, said one of them, a therapist who sat across from me at the restaurant.
Oh, okay.
That's life. That's being alive and going to meet someone you don't know well. Yeah, said the other woman beside her, a historian. It's called sexual tension. Stay with it for a minute and you might get some. They can't, said my friend, with a triumphant disgust. She told us about a woman she knew that was dating a man from another city. After weeks of saying, I can't wait to see you, the man ghosted her during his actual visit. His explanation, he'd been too anxious. Oh, poor baby, cried the historian, and we all cooed and moaned.
If this was men talking about women, can you believe the reaction, right?
For the poor whittle fraidy cat boo-boo working themselves into a frenzy of laughter over men's inability to quote-unquote man up and F us. We are four women at a vegan restaurant in downtown Manhattan. We knew what show we were in and couldn't help but wonder in a smug, chauvinistic way, where are the men who could handle hard stuff, like leaving the house for sex? Just a quick reminder for people who don't know this, the Sex and the City writer, the person who created this world that this woman is looking up to and trying to recreate, has said that she made a mistake and wishes that instead she had gotten married and had lots of kids, and that the whole sleeping around and dedicating her life to her career was a huge life mistake. And I'm like, whoa, lady, like, Do you not understand that? Let's take the man at his face value here, and he really did have anxiety. So the man had anxiety because he was dating the type of woman who liked to go to restaurants with her friends and demasculinize and make fun of him by your own admission. It's not just you, it's all of the girls here. Why are guys able to use you and all of these other women without feeling bad about it? Because this is who you are. You dehumanize them in the way that you talk about them. Everything you think, say, and breathe is toxic. Like, would you not see it as a major red flag, even just for a friend as a female, if you had a female do this in front of you?
Yes, I would see this as a red flag.
And some of these women, making fun of men for having anxiety is a therapist. If you are a man going to see a therapist and that therapist is a woman, know that this is the type of thing that she's joking about on weekends with the money that you pay her. Just keep that in mind, right? No, it's this is where the urban monoculture comes from, right? Like, her core happiness throughout this entire piece is belittling the men she is dating to other women. That seems to be the only place that she's still getting happiness from, and yet she wants a man, right? This is where the hetero-fatalism comes from, and it's mentally destroying her.
Yeah, she resents and seems to hate and belittle men, but she also seems to be largely dependent on them for her physical pleasure and just amusement. So that's not great.
When did men get so anxious about desire? Asked the therapist. And I said, I didn't know. Yes, you do, my friend said. It was when they were put on notice that they can't just get drunk and grope us. And it's like, but lady, you're the one saying you want these men to be more aggressive. Of course, if you have...
Yeah, isn't she basically just saying, why can't this guy just get drunk and grope me?
Yeah. What? Of course they have anxiety when they're getting these sorts of missed signals, especially when you consider the consequences of misreading the signals. But let's go to a different part here. I thought that part was useful, so you can get an understanding of like who this person is at their core, right?
Sure, yeah.
And then you look at her on this market and with this perspective of, I am cursed to have to date the other gender rather than reflecting on her own behavior. And at no point in this entire piece does she once reflect on her own behavior. She seems almost pathologically incapable of it. There are many roots to the species of disappointment I am circling here. But however we get there, the complaint is so common, such a cultural narrative staple, that the Academy is weighing in. We now have a fancy word, hetero-pessimism, to describe the outlook of straight women fed up with the mating behavior of men, coined by the sexual scholar Asen Surin, who later amended it to hetero-fatalism. The term seems at first glance to distill a mood that is no less timely than being timeless. Whereas she just comes across like a sexual predator here, right? Like everything about the men who she is making fun of are expressing their vulnerability, and she is exploiting that.
She's not even talking about the mating patterns of men, because these men clearly don't want to reproduce with the women in question.
Don't want her.
Yeah.
It was really, well, I love how she starts with it. It's about the men who I want not desiring me enough. Quote, it was really nice, end quote. A close friend texted me recently, reporting on her third date with a lawyer. He's really sweet and nice to me and good at sex. No doubt something humiliating and nightmarish will occur soon. On more than one occasion, when my friend checked in with the lawyer to confirm tentative plans, he did not respond to her for many hours or even a day. Granted, he worked a punishing schedule, but my friend reasoned it took 90 seconds for him to send a quick reply. The dissonance between his caring and attentive in-person behavior and these silences confused her, and she mentioned this to him. The lawyer was sorry that he kept her waiting. He hadn't meant to, but he said her complaint got him thinking. He unfortunately wasn't able to escalate whatever was happening between them into a relationship. My friend clarified that she had not been asking to escalate into anything. No, you literally did ask to escalate. You were saying, why do you only talk to me when you want sex? And he was saying, I thought that's what this was. I thought I had signaled that to you very, very loudly. If you want something more, you're not getting that with me. And she's like, oh, no. Sorry. I want to keep doing the sex thing. Treat me however you want, and I'll just keep waiting, and then eventually you'll get more time and more into me. But he's telling her, I'm not into you that way, right? She wants the intimacy, and he's signaling that that's not what their relationship is about. Now, note here, what does the friend do? My friend clarified that she had not been looking to escalate anything, merely expressing a need for clarity about plans. He understood that. He said, but their quote unquote communication skills were obviously too different for them to continue dating. I love how the guy is even letting her down nicely. Like, the guy is being nice here. When he says our communication skills are different, he's saying, what the do you not get, B? I don't want to talk to you. I'm using you as a sex toy. Like, how do you not understand that? That you want more from me than that just shows that we don't want the same thing. So I'm going to let you go and pursue life with a guy who does. He is being eminently kind, and you're being a psycho.
I mean,
not just that, but her friend couldn't recognize this. And then her friend, when it is relayed to her, couldn't recognize this. So much that the original intent of what the guy was saying comes through in her piece, even. The humiliating and nightmarish part, she explained to me, was not so much the rejection as being cast against her will as, quote, the woman eager for a relationship, end quote. Cast against her will as the woman eager for a relationship, but that's what you are. This guy is probably dating and having sex with a bunch of other women. You are just a booty call. In her memoir, Fierce Attachments, Vivek Gornick describes the anguish of being ignored by a lover to her female friend. Why I couldn't absorb, she writes, was his plunging us back into the cruelty of old-fashioned man-woman stuff, turning me into a woman who waits for a phone call that never comes, and himself into the man who must avoid the woman who was waiting. But that's what you are. But do you see what I mean here? Like, they have built this nightmare scenario around themselves by refusing to accept reality that they are not desired by the category of men that they desire, and that they need to set their sights significantly lower. And many of the things that they see of as flaws are things that they're just going to have to bite the bullet on. She's never going to be able to get a guy as good as her original husband again. I wish, because, she's getting older every year and he's getting older every year, and apparently he can still date 20-year-olds. To skip to a different part in the piece, I wish I could just be gay with you, she said. And I said, I wish that too, so much. This was our commiserate routine, what Saracen might call, quote, performative disaffiliation with heterosexuality, end quote, or our spin on, quote, take my wife, please, end quote, to my straightness, please, take my attraction to men. Note, all of your conversations, it seems like, are just about how much you hate the people you're dating. Like, of course, that's going to spiral you into worse and worse relationships, always. But it seems to be the only thing you find happiness in. And not that women wouldn't do that, right? They are evolved to be that way to an extent.
What do you mean, to resent the men that they're with?
No, to gain benefit from gossiping.
Oh, okay.
They're going to look with their female community to have conversations that are gossipful. Is fatalism a useful concept? I took it up for a while, considered the positions the writer and gender scholar Sarah Abram had advanced the idea of, quote, complaints as feminist pedagogy, end quote, arguing that to bitch is inherently transgressive. So note here, even the woman who had invented this term, invented it with the idea that women should be bitching a lot. So that she does this a lot, and I don't think that they should be. I wouldn't appreciate my wife going around and bitching a lot.
Well, in general, philosophy that involves leaning into misery and negativity doesn't seem very productive.
Yeah. So what is she like when she's dating people these days? If you want to get a look inside her dating life.
Sure.
On the way to his place, I had been texting with my aunt, quote, word from an expert, end quote. She wrote, wait till he wants it so bad that he's nutsy cuckoo. Sounds facile, but man, truer words have never been spoken. Make him suffer is my mantra, exclamation mark. I kept catching myself staring at his mouth, his bottom lips. He told me to slow down. He needed me to get a better sense of me and how I worked. So note here, she thinks she's making him wait. He on the first date is like, whoa, you need to slow down. I lay back to murmur. And by the way, she ends up sleeping with him on the first date. I'm not going to get into all that, but okay. I lay back to murmur, let him try stuff. And he warmed to his own control, putting his mouth right up to mine, then pulling away when I tried to engage his tongue. I see what you are, he said, finally pinning my forearm. You're a bratty sub. He held himself there, just out of reach, breathing on me. I'd like to make you wait, he said. He did make me wait. And then it goes into everything that happened between them, which nobody needs to hear. And I find it weird that you wrote in an article. I guess you thought it was hot, but it just shows that you apparently have like 5 intimate encounters that you're able to describe in this article. And clearly this is a guy who's, been involved in the BDSM scene, been involved in sleeping around a lot, given the way that he's framing you, and is using you for sex. That's why he's framing you this way, even to yourself. When my friend complained about the lawyer, I expressed outrage at his behavior and worked my way quite naturally along a well-worn groove to condemnation of all, most men, as incapable of upholding basic standards of communication and care. But he's communicating very clearly. It is you and your friend who aren't listening. Like, as a woman even, you can understand what he's trying to tell her, right? Or am I crazy here? Is this like man language? If a guy was like, look, I don't have time for you, and then you're like, well, I need more of your time, and he said, well, clearly, we're having trouble communicating, we should end this relationship.
That's pretty clear. Yeah. That's not ambiguous.
I was thinking, of course, about Mr. J, and I am not proud that my instinct response to the shame of being gender stereotyped by life is to pay another stereotype forward. Men suck. Groundbreaking exclamation mark. But Mr. J never did anything to you. He told you exactly that he didn't want you. This lawyer told you exactly what he wanted. That's the other thing about this piece is the men in it seem to be so upstanding, and yet she's framing them as horrible because they don't do what she wants. This would be like a man hating you because you turned him down, right? Like, you're like, somebody was your friend, and then they're like, hey, can I sleep with you? And you're like, no, you can't sleep with me. I just want you for friendship. And they're like, well, okay, I guess I'm sort of bummed about that, but and then they're like, she's just using me to her friends. And you'd be like, what a sicko thing to say. But these men, just as clearly as you are to that friend, are saying, I just want you for sex. I don't want the friendship. I don't want the intimacy. That said, men struggle to communicate in romantic relationships is widespread enough to have earned psychological designation, normative male alexithymia, or the condition of being unable to put words into emotions. And the note here, she had the whole thing about emotional labor and new terms for emotional labor, hermetic labor, a new way for women to hate on men.
What is hermetic labor vis-a-vis emotional labor?
So she calls the work women do to demystify male cues hermetic layer, and posits it as a form of gender exploitation in intimate relationships. So her almost intentionally misunderstanding what these various guys in her life are telling her and her friend is them exploiting her. No, she's exploiting herself. But for another part I found interesting here, the stranger waiting at my back corner table looked a bit squarer than my average date. His hair apparently washed cut, and he wore a button-down short, but some restless mischief played on his face, bearing itself fully in our laugh. Our conversation was brisk and jesting. I got the impression that he was enjoying my company, but was more bonus than criteria for him. He was partnered already, he had told me, and seeking only compassionate sex. His dating profile referenced this clearly below the picture of him wearing a blue blazer petting a donkey's head. So now she's going on dates with people who tell her, I literally just want you for sex. That was in my dating profile. That is all you are to me. And getting mad that they're not giving her more. We turned eventually to the subject of erotic temperament. He was interested in the possibilities that arise between people when any eventuality of marriage, procreation, or fidelity was, so to speak, taken off the table. What might then happen in bed, that community, in that world, watching his clean-cut, boyish form and listening to him speak with eloquent enthusiasm of a connoisseur, the phrase that occurred to me was sex nerd, many dabblers in non-monogamy were not really, he noted with a laugh, quoting from Chati, about that life he was. I meet his type around sometimes, fluent in the language of polyamory, waving his respectful desire like a plastic saber. Pew pew. Why would you play with just one toy when you can take turns with all the toys? And that's what you are, a toy, a sex toy to somebody like him. Why at the same time vaguely subverting something? Capitalism. I love that. She's like proud of what he's doing with her. And he's telling her, I don't want this thing that you want, right? I find this wild. This men can't communicate, and she just so clearly makes it
and then
clear
she proceeds to give a ton of examples of men really clearly communicating. The theme isn't that men can't communicate. The theme is that men are not communicating the message that she desires.
Exactly, which is that they want her, which they don't.
But that, I mean, in the first quote that you led with in this discussion, that is what she said. She said the problem was they don't want her enough. It wasn't necessarily that they weren't communicating. It was that they don't want her. They don't want to commit to her in any meaningful way. And she doesn't seem to understand that casual sex does not equal slavish devotion and obsession.
Yeah. And if you want to see how she screws things up, was this one? You're flattering the men. A former lover wrote me after I sent him a partial draft of this essay. They never get to be real. And you see the men in her life just use her. Like clearly she's not flattering the men in this piece, but the guy knows that's what she wants to hear. So she made it easier to use. They use to confirm a story about disappointment and frustration. This man I met last fall when he was, like me, reeling from romantic rejection. And within half an hour, we lunged at each other as though by tacit agreement to be each other's comforting, orgasm-giving blankets for a time. We traded obsessive accounts of failed relationships, cheered each other on through the rigors of no contact, watched Albert Burks movies, belted Weezer songs and karaoke tracks on his couch. Whatever was happening between us went on for about 6 weeks, at which point I became annoyed that he was withholding something from me, though I couldn't say what exactly. So you found a guy that liked doing what you like to do most, which is bitch about other people. And you feel like he's withholding something from you because, again, he doesn't want a real relationship with you, and accused him of coldness and accused him of being unfair and so on. The familiar female demanded male withdrawal pattern descended on us like a polarizing spell. Unlike some other exchanges of my past, this one had an oddly mechanical quality. And then blah, 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 blah. Eventually, I admitted to him that it felt more natural to me to default to quote unquote wounded female rather than assume responsibility for my desires. Any self-realization here? Your desires. So instead of recognizing your desires, you defaulted to the internal framing of a wounded female. For his part, he described a large looming X who adapted the use of guilt and left its mark. And this is clearly what she was doing. She was using guilt. Like, look at you. You're oppressing me. You're hurting me. And it's showing that that is something that she is doing tacitly. She's admitting that. One guy I went on spoke of a hint of longing about a relationship between his grandparents, who barely spoke to each other before getting married as teenagers in Sicily, then thrown together by slim pickings village life, adolescent hormones, and the oppressive myths of female honor. What a system. What a gamble. And then both people were trapped for life, but at least you were spared the anxiety of choice. At least there was that. But what I love is you don't actually get choice because nobody who you want seems to want you. And then there's another part where she goes deep into maybe I'm aromantic and blah, 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 blah about that. But I want to get your thoughts on this person because I think you can get a full picture of their life and what it's like to be a woman on the dating market these days and what it might feel like to you to be on the dating market if you were out sleeping around. I would say if you're a young woman and you're listening to this, this is what dating is like if you hit your mid-30s. You need to get off the market before your mid-30s. Your life will become a hellscape. Like either you withdraw for men or you end up being passed around by this woman by men who clearly don't care about you.
I think there are some highly educated professionals who are in their 30s really looking to get married who are just going for it. And I think that those dates are far more like the dates that I would want to go on, which is like, okay, what do you want? Like there's that not famous, but like people often cite that scene in like some random show where some couple's having a very unromantic discussion about like how they would be married. And they ultimately decide not to get married because they're like, well, no, I'm not meeting with a mother-in-law or something like that. But it's just kind of like these cold negotiations about potential married life together. And that would be okay.
Melanie, I'm single, you're single. What do you say we get married? What's your offer?
Single rich male seeks matrimony.
Primary residence?
Westchester County.
Would you be open to considering a secondary residence in Manhattan?
Central Park West.
South.
Done. Time spent together.
8 hours, 5 days a week.
7 hours, 12 hours weekends.
55 hours aggregate, specifics to be determined later.
I'm amenable to that. Children.
1.
3.
2.
Done. One of them has to be a male.
I'll see what I can do. Vacations.
December, Hawaii.
June, the vineyard.
June, fine, but Hawaii.
Nope, the vineyard.
Is that a deal breaker for you?
I'm afraid so.
Me too. Well, we gave it a shot.
And I think that that exists is just completely unmoored from this world of mostly casual sex.
Well, I
both
think this
married and
guy who
unmarried
talked about his grandparents in Sicily and saying that's what he wants was signaling to her, hey, let's have a real conversation about marriage.
But she doesn't want that. So yeah, there are clearly different markets. I think that the really tragic thing that happens to many young women in their 20s is they end up on this casual sex market, either because they've been told to just explore in their 20s, as I was, but I just didn't, or because they don't realize and they think that this is just these, and all dating markets for marriage and for just fun are all the same. So they're just on it and they get trapped in it.
She wants the guy who she saw in rom-coms growing up. She wants the manic pixie dream boy. That's what Jay was simulating for her. But when Jay was simulating that for her, when these other guys have simulated that for her, that's not their real personality. It's something they're doing to get sex from her.
I don't know. She seems to just be interested in the individual encounters. What confuses me is that she does want more when she seems to be so keen on just the passionate sex. So I'm confused. I feel like she just keeps ruining it when she could just be getting casual sex. And if she filled her pipeline more, like any normal guy who wants the same thing that she proposes to want, aside from this extra commitment, blah, 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 is, I want to, if I want to physically satisfy myself in a sexual way, okay, great. And where she gets frustrated is the guys are too anxious to come out or whatever. But like, then you should have a backup rota of guys that she can just text and be like, you up, and then they can meet up and have their assignation, and it's great. So what confuses me is that she seems to really enjoy just the sex, and yet I don't even know if she wants the commitment. She seems to enjoy complaining about the commitment and maybe thinks that it is important to do so, or else she'll come across as too vapid.
And I think the framing of all of this around the Sex in the City, like this is what she knows, hanging out with a friend group who just sits around complaining about men, right? And so even if she's had a potentially good relationship with a man at the time, she, like the friend who was dating the lawyer and everything was going well, and she was like, I need to find something to be worried about, right? Like obviously things are going to go bad because that's the framing I have of what it means to be in a relationship with a man. Whereas I didn't see this with the women I dated. I did not have many like actually negative relationships with women. And
she wants to see this as negative. I think, maybe it's part of the version of feminism that she subscribes to, where of course these men are terrible. Of course this is the worst. So that would make a lot more sense to me than whatever it is she says she's doing. Because she's so vague about what she even means by commitment. I mean, I don't think any reasonable person, and she's clearly educated. I don't like her writing style because I find it kind of hard to follow and understand. And she's trying to be very like florid and poetic. But
I know, I understand.
Not in a good way. I mean, I can appreciate the good turn of phrase, but that just ain't it for me, at least. And I think that, she's only saying these things that she logically knows are entitled and preposterous and impossible because she needs to have something that she can resent about men that she herself is just exploiting as much as they are maybe exploiting.
Well, I mean, it's mutual exploitation.
Yeah.
That she is exploiting in a way that ultimately frustrates her. Like,
I don't know if those men are exploiting her because the exploitation isn't in the sex, in the casual sex, because that's mutually agreed to. I think the exploitation is in the act of trouncing on these men's reputation, mental health.
Well, I think in demanding from them something that they've clearly signaled they're not interested in. This is as exploitative as the man who pushes past the sexual boundaries of women. And then
that conversation at lunch, if this was a bunch of men talking about women, why don't they just get over it and have sex with, like, what? That you can't. Wow.
And men really, by the way, adult men really do not talk about women this way that frequently. I have never heard one of my friends in private ever talk about women this way. I mean, it might be the guys I'm with. Guys might have done this in previous generation. I get the impression that like boomers and maybe like in Trump's generation, people did that.
It seems like a grab her by the pussy kind of conversation. It's just so crazy that like these are the women who put on pussy hats, and yet they are having the grab him by the pussy like conversation.
Yeah, but I don't think men of my generation talk about women in these.
No. Locker room talk these days is about like video games, not women.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is. I know, like, actually, like, all the women are in the other room thinking, like, what is he talking about?
What are they saying about me? And they're like talking about
video games and like Warhammer.
Exactly.
And, like, no, literally, like, I go see like my brother, and it's like pulls me aside because he knows he's not allowed to talk about video games in front of his wife because it annoys her because we talk too much about video games and she can't follow. And so he like pulls me aside. He's like, "Hey, have you played the new whatever?"
I know. You're great. It's so great.
Right.
Yeah, that's
love you.
Love you too.
Thank you for not being this way, and thank you for saving me from this carousel of horribleness. And I think for a lot of guys, what you need to take away from this is if you think that women who are writing the quote-unquote carousel or the quote-unquote alpha widows, if you think that it is traditionally masculine men who you are losing to, it is not. It is men who play these roles for them. But don't play these roles for them, because the type of fish you catch with that lure is psycho, like this.
Yeah, and these are not women that I've encountered. I have not met women like this. That's why this is so weird to hear. So yeah, I think you've made this point in other podcasts.
This is in the New York Times. It's been like some random.
I know, but still, the red pill men are like, why are women so terrible? And it's because they're selecting for this really weird population, and like, where are all the good women? Like they're there. You've just gone to like. You want bread and you've gone to a butchery shop, and I don't know what to tell you. What
means by this is that the tactics that you're using, like a lure, catches a specific kind of fish or a specific kind of woman.
Where they're going to the wrong marketplace. I mean, the place where you go to look for women is going to influence the type of women that you get.
Yeah, but the manic pixie dream girl boy thing, that catches one type of woman. The tough dark triad frame thing, that catches another type of women. Both of these types of women are trash. You know, I mean, my thing was the whole intellectual nerdy thing. It caught a really good group of women.
Yeah, y'all need to go to more anime conventions to find women.
The women I've dated, I really like them as people. Like I feel like I had a lot of.
They're super cool. I've yet to encounter stories of or IRL meetings with ex-girlfriends of yours that I haven't found to be fantastic people who I wouldn't want to be friends with. So,
yeah. All right, love you to death, Simone.
Love you too, gorgeous. The other link is ready to go, so I'll see you in there. Could be a little brighter. I was just listening to a lecture on the life of Laura Ingalls Wilder. She's the author of the Little House on the Prairie books, which are, I mean, they're not like 100% accurate. They're based on her memories of her childhood in like the mid 1800s in homesteads, largely in on the prairie in the US. And man, life is so much better now. It was rough. And I remember reading those books as a kid with my mom and just thinking about how romantic it all was. And I'm going back and I'm thinking about what she actually was living. And I'm like, no, thank you. Absolutely not. She had a little brother who died in infancy. They lived in I thought that this idea of living in a sod house at the time sounded so romantic and wonderful. But no, they're living in a dirt hole. That is what a sod house had. Somehow, her sister went blind. Oh, just because, they thought it was scarlet fever, but it was probably some form of like encephaly, like her brain swelled so much that she went blind. Like, no, this is not romantic. This is not, you don't want that. You don't. And we're so freaking lucky. I mean, I still like marvel at the fact that we get to take warm water showers. I feel like everyone should live at least a month with either no running water or at least only cold showers. Like I did that for a month in Mexico, and it was, and I'm too OCD to not take a shower every day. So I still had to do it, even though it was like
No, I've lived on boats a number of times
Oh,
where
yeah, so
I had to do that.
that's
And
not
it's
an option.
worse on a boat because you're constantly covered in sea air and everything
Oh,
like
yeah,
that.
you're so sticky and gross. Yeah.
You're constantly sticky and gross and everything's sticking together and
Well, and to think what it was like for families who crossed the Atlantic or any
Oh yeah, none of
anybody
them would have been able to take freshwater showers.
no, well, or
during their
any
entire
showers.
voyage.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you pull up a bucket of seawater, but I mean, probably not even that. I mean, my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, with just the luxury living. Like, I was just thinking too, everyone's like, oh, I mean, like, and now I'm all on sourdough, everything. I was sourdough every day. I'm making all my sourdough starter. But like, okay, and I think a lot of people making them and their jams with their chickens, and like, we're kind of getting in that direction, right? But like, most of their meals were just basically flavorless. You know, like just this is not. I love fresh homemade, scratch simple ingredient meals, but I love that tonight I'm making you pho. I love that we have gochujang paste or sauce like in our refrigerator. Like we live such luxurious lives.
Oh no,
in so many
I
ways.
can't even. Yeah. And the perfect sycophantic assistants to tell us everything we want to hear about ourselves in the form of AI.
Right. Like our primary that's like the gout of our times, right? Like
It is
before,
actually. It is
yeah.
at the gout of our times. Like
Uh-huh.
gout came because like they got sugar for the first time and they were just like all
You're
the
like too much
royalty.
fat and salt or something. Yeah.
Anyway, I will get started here.
Let's do it. I'm excited. You're my palate cleanser of the day after all the nonsense.
It was funny. I've been reading more. I'm so addicted to romance mangas, by the way, which are clearly made for women. I got into it because I read that first one because we were doing the Omegaverse episode. And I was like, are there any Omegaverses that a man might like? And then I found one that was only women. And so I was like, okay, this might be interesting. But then after that, because it was a villainous one, somebody waking up in the body of a villainous, I just started going into the villain scenario isekais, which were often like female romances. And I realized why I like them today.
Okay.
So much. It's because I really like, as you know from like me watching shows, where the protagonist is like a genuinely cruel villain.
100%.
That is my jam. And the thing is that when people write books for male audiences where the male's supposed to imagine themselves as a protagonist, they always put too many like qualifiers in for them actually being like good people. But when it's about the woman supposed to be desiring the protagonist, they really don't mind leaning hard on dark triad traits.
Okay, of course, right.
And so they're much more villainous. And I'm just like, yeah, you go. And always, or very frequently, the logic behind their quote unquote like ruthless actions is just it's the most logical and efficient outcome, which means they're making stupid choices less, which I love. Like if somebody annoys them in court, they're just like, kill them. Like, what? I don't want to risk this. Very fun.
That is really funny.
Right. The women liking bastards, it does me a solid. And people will know this because I do isekai scenarios with AI, and I'm going to begin publishing some new ones soon that are really, really good because we've got our own AI system working on like the internal servers well enough that it'll eventually be on our Fab AI that I can create good stories with it. Potentially better than the original ones I was making. But anyway, those are available to Patreon followers, but we do them in audiobook. Okay, what are you doing? You're gonna do it? Titan, jump. Titan, show me what you're holding. It's a pregnant woman? Talisman? Here we go.